In this video, we're going to learn about special right triangles. Today, we're going to focus solely on the 45, 45, 90 special right triangles. So in special right triangles, you're going to be given one side of a triangle, and you're going to have to find the other two sides. And we're not going to use trig like we did in the past. We're going to use these properties of special right triangles. I laid out the steps that we're going to do for every problem. We're going to label all the sides. We're going to set the given side equal to the label. We'll solve for x. Sometimes it'll already be done for us, but if not, we'll solve it ourselves. And then we're going to plug in x to find the other side lengths. So the first special triangle that we're going to look at is called the 45, 45, 90 triangle. It's an isosceles right triangle. So what that looks like is we have a right triangle, so it has a right angle. The other two angles are 45 degrees, hence the name 45, 45, 90. And here's how we're going to label our sides. The legs, the sides attached to the right angle, are x. The hypotenuse across from the right angle is x multiplied by root 2. I will give you a picture of this triangle for your assessments, okay? You just have to know how to use it. You don't have to memorize how to draw it. So we're going to be using this triangle, okay, to solve for missing sides. And we're going to go through these 4 steps each time. So in our first example, we have to find each missing side length. So they have a 45, 45, 90. I know that because it has a 45-degree angle. They told me this leg is 4. We have to find side N and side M. So step 1 says to label all sides of the triangle, and you label them according to the picture we just drew. So the two legs, the sides attached to the right angle, are x. I'm going to 4 is x, N is x, and the hypotenuse M is x root 2. So step 1 is to label all the sides, and that's what I did. I labeled the sides. Step 2, set the given side equal to the label. Well, the given side is the side where they give us a number. So in this case, the given side is 4, and we have to set it equal to the label. The label is x. So I have to set the given side, which is 4, equal to the label, and the label is x. These are equal. Step 3 says solve for x, but sometimes the step is done for you. In this case, it is. 4 equals x. I don't have to solve for x. X is already by itself, so step 3 is done. Step 4, plug in x for the other side lengths. So I need to find these other side lengths. So I have to find side N. Well, that means I just have to plug in x right here. So for N is also going to be 4. Why? Well, x is that side, and x is 4, so that means this side is also 4. Which makes sense because these legs are congruent. They're both x, so they're both always going to be the same number. For the hypotenuse, we have to plug x in here. So for side M, it's x root 2. So instead of x, I'm going to plug in the 4. So it'd be 4 root 2. There's no simplifying left to do, so that is my answer. So again, I labeled my sides. I set the given side equal to the label. I didn't have to solve for x because x was already by itself. And I plugged in x to each of these other missing sides. Let's try another example. So here, number 2, first step, label all your sides. Well, the legs are each x, and the hypotenuse is x times root 2. Step 2, set the given side equal to the label. Well, in this case, the given side, 9, set it equal to the label x. So 9 equals x. Step 3 says to solve for x, In this case, we don't have to. X is already by itself. And step 4, plug in X to the other side lengths. So for side Y, it's also going to be 9 because the legs are the same. I plugged in 9 for X and all I have is 9. For side X, which is the hypotenuse, I'm going to plug 9 in for X for that side. So instead of X root 2, I'm going to substitute 9 for X, so 9 root 2. Since those cannot be simplified, that's our answer. We're going to do several examples. I want to show you some of every kind. So let's look at this next one from our notes. Step 1, label your sides. The legs are each X. The hypotenuse is X root 2. Step 2, set the given side equal to the label. Well, the given side here is 7 root 2. I have to set it equal to this label. So I have 7 root 2, that's the given side, equals the label. Well, the label is X root 2. So this time we do have to complete step 3, which is solving for X. When it says solve for X, that means you want to get X completely by itself. And right now it's being multiplied by root 2. So to get X by itself, I have to do the inverse of multiplying by root 2, which is dividing. So I'm going to divide both sides by root 2. When I do that, root 2 divided by root 2, they're inverses. So I can cancel those out. I can also do the same here. Root 2 and root 2, they're inverses. They cancel out. So I end up with 7 equals X. So the X value that I have to plug in is 7. So for side X, plugging in X for the other side lengths, well, side X, the label is just X, so it's going to be just 7. For Y, again, it's just an X. I have to plug in 7 for X, so Y is also just 7. Remember, a good way to know if you're on the right track, the two legs should always be the same number, 7 and 7. For this one, 9 and Y was 9. For this one, 4 and N was 4. All right, let's go to the next page and do a few more examples. We're going to skip number 4 and go to number 5. So, step 1, label your sides. The legs are X, X and X, and the hypotenuse is X root 2. Step 2, set your given side equal to the label. So my given side is 3 root 2, and I'm going to set it equal to the label. The label is X. So I don't have to solve for X here. X is already by itself. So now I can proceed and just plug in this X value for each of the other side lengths. So for side V, X is 3 root 2, so I take that and I plug it in for X. So side V is also 3 root 2. Which again makes sense because remember the legs are going to be congruent. So if this side is 3 root 2, V should also be 3 root 2. Now for the hypotenuse, side U, I have to take 3 root 2 and plug it in for X there. So X is 3 root 2, and there's already a root 2 in that side length. So it'll be 3 root 2, we're multiplying it by root 2. So X was 3 root 2, that's what I plugged in here, but you can't forget there's already a root 2 still there. So we always, as we've been doing, have to simplify our answers. So for side U, I have 3. Remember, you can multiply what's inside the radicals. So I have 2 and 2. 2 times 2 is 4, so I have 3 times root 4. Well, the square root of 4 is 2. So it'd be 3 times 2. which gives me a final answer of 6 for you. So this one was a little different because x had a coefficient and a radical. And we could actually simplify. When we plugged in this number in for x here, we could simplify our answer by combining our radicals. Let's try number 9. So the first step, label your sides. The legs are each x, and the hypotenuse is x multiplied by root 2. Step 2, set your given side equal to the label. Well, our given side is 2, and it equals the label x root 2. So the next step says that we have to solve for x, and in this case we do because x is not by itself. So we're going to solve by doing the inverse. So x is being multiplied by root 2, so the inverse of that is dividing by root 2. They're inverses, so these cancel. So I have 2 root 2, 2 over root 2 is equal to x. Now I cannot leave that because as we just learned, you cannot be finished and have a radical on the bottom of a fraction. A radical cannot be in the denominator. So remember we learned to rationalize. And to rationalize, we multiply the top and bottom by whatever that radical on the bottom is. So in this case, the radical on the bottom is root 2, so I'm going to multiply by root 2 over root 2. So on top, outside the radical is 2, inside is root 2. Don't mix them. On the bottom, root 2 times root 2 is root 4. So we can keep simplifying. I can't simplify the top, but the square root of 4 is 2. And lastly, we can simplify these outside numbers. 2 divided by 2 is 1. You don't have to write a 1 coefficient in front of the radical, so I'm just going to leave it as root 2. You can write a 1 if you want, but it's not necessary. So root 2 is equal to x. Okay? So this, we had to solve for x, and solving for x took a few extra steps. But this is the x value now that we have to plug in for these missing sides. So for side n is just x, so I have to plug in root 2 here. So n is just going to be root 2. Nothing to simplify. M will also, since that label is just x, be root 2. So this one took a little longer because we had to solve for x. And when we did that, we had to remember we have to rationalize that denominator because it's not simplified if there's a radical on the bottom of a fraction. So once we did that, all that solving gave us what our x value was. And then we took that x value and we plugged it in for those other missing side lengths. All right, we're going to do one more. We're going to go back up. We're going to look at number 6. So for number 6, first step, label your sides. The legs are each x. The hypotenuse is x root 2. Step 2, set the given side equal to the label. So the given side is 5 root 2 over 2. I'm going to set it equal to the label. The label is x. In this case, we don't have to solve for x. X is by itself, so this is the x value that I will be plugging in for each side. So I have to plug it in to get side n, and I plug it in for x here to get side m. So side n has the same label as the given side. They're both x. So both legs are always congruent. So n is 5 root 2 over 2. Okay? Nothing to simplify. That's our answer. Side M, I'm going to plug 5 root 2 over 2 in for x. So I have 5 root 2 over 2. Don't forget there's this still times root 2 here that we have to remember to account for. I plugged x in for x here, but there's still a root 2 we have to multiply. So I'm going to make it a fraction by putting it over 1. And now we simplify. Outside the radical is 5. Inside, 2 times 2 is 4, so I have root 4. And on the bottom, 2 times 1 is 2. We can keep simplifying. The square root of 4 is 2, so 5 times 2 divided by 2. 5 times 2 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So for my final answer for M, I get 5. Again, because you want me to write that step out, I have 10 divided by 2, and that's where I get this answer of 5. So the process for all of these problems is the same. First, you set all of your sides equal to the labels. X is the label for both legs. X root 2 is the label for the hypotenuse. You set the given side equal to the label. Okay, here, set it equal to the label. For the one for number 9, we set it equal to the label. Sometimes you have to solve for x if it's not by itself by doing inverse operations. Sometimes you don't have to solve because it's already by itself. Then you take whatever your x value is and you plug it in for the missing side lengths. All of your answers must be simplified.